Hey, welcome everyone to this LinkedIn Live talk with Sean Wiid, CEO of UP42, fantastic company that we'll be hearing a lot more about from the geospatial space. My name's Juergen Eckel. I'm a managing director and partner at BCG Digital Ventures. I lead our Central European and Middle Eastern business. And I've had the pleasure of actually being part of the journey with Airbus that ultimately led to founding UP42, and have continued to stay close to Sean and the team and help advise and help advise them. So I'm really excited to have you here, Sean, and maybe you can introduce yourself briefly and tell all of us a bit about what UP42 is all about, what it is.
Sure. Thanks, Juergen. Thanks for the introduction, and super glad to be with you today on this LinkedIn Live talk. My name is Sean Wiid. I'm the CEO of UP42. I'm originally from South Africa and have been living in Berlin now for around 12 years. I've spent the better part of 2 decades now working in the geospatial industry across a range of different countries and industries. And I think what we're doing at UP42 is really a culmination of what I've been working on previously, and also just yet another iteration of my strong belief in how geospatial technology has a massive potential to do good in the world. So UP42 itself, UP42 is a developer platform and a geospatial marketplace. And our main goal is to help to basically lower the barrier to entry for using geospatial data and analytics at scale. We are a 100% subsidiary of Airbus Defence and Space. And of course, we were part of the incubation process between Airbus and BCG Digital Ventures based out of Berlin. Currently, we are 64 people, with most of them in Berlin, with also some parts of the team in the US as well from a sales perspective. And we founded the company in early 2019. So we've just had, about a week ago, we had the 2-year anniversary of our commercial launch, which was a nice milestone for us. When Airbus decided to found UP42, essentially it was a realization that with the extremely fast growth of new Earth observation constellations, it was going to be necessary to find a different way to reach new developers, to reach new markets, to reach new companies. And the traditional way of selling Earth observation data and working with observation data is very centric, is very sort of consolidated around large companies doing businesses with large governments or other large companies. And there's not so much scale from a platform perspective, from a developer perspective, from a long tail perspective. And this is what we're trying to do at UP42, is basically break down these barriers to entry, make sure that it's easy for people to access data under a single contract, under a single technical platform, make sure that it's easy for people to access a wide range of algorithms from some of the best geospatial companies in the world, and easy to run those algorithms at scale to extract insight from the data. What's different about UP42 as well is that it's not only trying to benefit the users of the platform and the people who need the data and the analytics, but it's also benefiting the providers of the data and the providers of the analytics. So UP42 is providing a neutral marketplace where all companies in the geospatial industry are able to resell their data, resell their analytics, and we're trying to be a fair and neutral additional sales channel for those providers. So a very exciting journey we're on. Very proud of the progress we've made in the first 2.5 years, and definitely looking forward to seeing how we can grow this thing long term.
True. Hey, access to geospatial data at scale for everyone sounds super exciting. But let's take half a step back. I'm a computer scientist. I'm not from the industry originally. I know I spent quite a lot of time diving in when we originally started 2.5, 3 years ago to understand what this is all about. But maybe we take half a step back and give everyone a super brief intro on what we're actually talking about when we talk about geospatial data, Earth observation constellations, geospatial analytics at scale.
Sure. I think it's always easy for us to get launched into the details there when you're so close to it all the time. And one thing I've realized now over the last 2-3 years is that what we're doing with satellite data in particular, it's a niche within a niche. Geospatial in itself is it's applicable to many industries, and it has a lot of use cases, and it's a lot of benefits for pretty much every industry you can think of. but it's still pretty much a niche. And the use of satellite imagery and Earth observation is almost a niche within a niche at this point. But that's the part that we're trying to change. So let's focus mainly around Earth observation to start with, because that's the part that was essentially the genesis of UP42, and where we fit into the overall industry is really starting with satellite imagery and being able to democratize access to that. So what's typically happened in the satellite industry is that you have two kinds of data. One is more sort of the open data around satellites like Landsat or the European Space Agency's Copernicus program. These are publicly funded satellites that are up there, and they're able to collect data of what's happening on the Earth. Typically, what you'll find is that these open source satellites, or it's rather open data, not open source satellites, but the satellites that are being run by public institutions and provide data for free for everyone to be able to use. These are great, but they're limited in their resolution, which means basically it's taking pictures of what's happening on the ground, whether it's optical imagery, so similar to a photograph, or whether it's radar imagery, basically versions or parts of the spectrum that you can't see with your eye, but you can still extract a lot of information from. The resolution is relatively high. The resolution is relatively low, which means that you're not able to detect a lot of things at a very detailed level. You can detect changes at a high level. So this is the one limitation. The other limitation is that working with this information is actually very, very difficult. It requires special pre-processing to get the data ready for actually the real analytics. And then if you're trying to process this information at scale, the only way you can really do that, given the volume of information, is to be able to run machine learning at scale in the cloud. Now, all of this is very highly specific. It takes a lot of skills. Training the machine learning algorithms is difficult. Running it at scale is hard. And that's just for the publicly available data. Then you start getting to the other side of things, which is the commercial data. Companies like Airbus, Planet, Maxar, Capella, ISI, etc. And they have constellations of much higher quality, much higher resolution satellites, which are able to get very, very detailed imagery and very, very detailed information of what's happening on the ground. And that's hugely advantageous for a number of reasons. I mean, one of them obviously is if you're able to get down to the level where you can even detect road markings or count cars, or be able to figure out not only the kind of, not only how many planes you can see, but what kind of plane is it. This is obviously hugely advantageous for a number of different use cases. The problem though is quite simply that it's very hard to buy this data. Usually it's sold to governments in multi-year contracts, or to large institutions or large companies, also again with multi-year contracts. And none of these large providers are really incentivized to open up this data and make it easy to buy for more of, I hesitate to say the long tail, because I think the long tail in my industry means something different to the long tail in other industries. But at least to a broader range of startups and smaller companies and NGOs, etc. So there's a huge amount of commercial complexity, the range of contracts and licensing restrictions and intransparency on the pricing, and there's a huge amount of technical complexity in terms of the range of APIs that are available. Sometimes there are no APIs available. The data is delivered via FTP, all communication is via email, etc. And that's the part that's hard, the commercial complexity and the technical complexity to access this data, as well as all of the complexities around processing this data. And this is the thing that we believe at UP42 is really holding down the downstream social economic impact that Earth observation data can actually have. I'll give you an example which I personally love. There's a company in the Netherlands called Space for Good. And it's a small company, but they're doing a lot of really great project work and building up parts of the value chain to deliver real value to basically social causes. And one of the examples they gave recently was there was a forest fire in Borneo, which they discovered using their processing chain, and they alerted the authorities, and they were able to get it put out on the same day. Now, awesome. I don't know how you can measure the value of that forest fire not happening. I mean, with all the other wildfires that have happened around the world recently, I'm pretty sure it would have been nice if some of those were prevented as well. So our view is that if we're able to lower the barriers to entry to the point where more organizations like Space for Good can have their eyes on more different kinds of problems across more regions of the world, then we'll be able to have a lot more oversight in terms of what's happening from an economic perspective, from an environmental perspective, and be able to mitigate the effects, for example, of climate change or severe weather events much more quickly and much more effectively by having this oversight. And that's what we're there for. We're trying to take away all of this heavy lifting to be able to allow companies like Space for Good and our other customers, Liveo, AI Dash, Overstory, etc., to focus really on solving that specific problem in a specific industry that they were created to solve.
Awesome. I love the example. You talked a bit about the niche within the niche, right? And now we have a fantastic sustainability social impact ESG example. But who's Up42 for? I mean, the niche of the niche doesn't sound like it's easy to scale, or like there's a huge market out. Who are the new players you're targeting? Who's this for?
So firstly, by niche within a niche, I think I meant something slightly different. It was more just from a sort of technical perspective. The people who really know how to work with satellite imagery and really know how to build machine learning algorithms for satellite imagery, that's the niche within the niche. I think the applicability of the technology is universal across all industries. So if I look at Up42 today, like where we are right now, we are very focused on providing a platform for people who want to build the end user solutions. And I take the example of Liveo, for example. We just had a webinar with Liveo last week. Liveo is a company also based out of Berlin. They're very focused on vegetation management for railways, for electricity networks. And essentially their purpose right now is to help those organizations to mitigate the risk of vegetation encroachment along critical infrastructure. And whether that's to figure out how to proactively trim back the vegetation to prevent trees falling over on the train tracks, or prevent trees falling onto the electricity lines, or it's about very quickly cleaning up after an extreme weather event. I mean, the economic impact of doing this well and doing this at scale is massive. And we can see this already with the kinds of customer success that Liveo is having with Deutsche Bahn and E.ON and others in both Germany and in Australia and in the US. So right now, that's our main focus. How do we provide the best possible platform for companies like Liveo to focus on the actual customer solution and not have to worry necessarily about how to create a consistent set of connections to all of the different data providers and how to make sure that all of the different pieces that you would need to be able to build a processing pipeline end to end using that data is in place. So this is where we are focusing right now. We see, however, two paths forward for us. One of them is pushing more towards the long tail of GIS analysts or people who use GIS, and basically that would mean for us, embedding more directly into the tools that they use every day to give them easy access to the data and the insights from the data, and also pushing more towards the opposite of the long tail, or the tall head, basically the larger companies, where they may have some custom needs around what kind of algorithms they need and what kind of processing pipelines they need. And we've seen quite a lot of interest in Up42 moving to support larger companies in that space, particularly in oil and gas, in infrastructure management, and also in some cases in sort of the maritime space for vessel detection and identification as well.
Great. Deep integration of, let's say, new data sources or unconventional data sources into processing flows and supply chains is something we see, I'd say, across a wide variety of B2B cases and industry solutions. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Who would be your dream sort of customer? Who can't you wait to have the phone ring from? If you think about that.
Oh,
this is your chance to now hopefully
question.
Have someone in our joint LinkedIn feeds to see this and then actually pick it up and call you.
Oh man, that's an interesting one. Let me stew on that a little bit. I think I'll have to come back to you on that one.
Putting you on the spot here on purpose.
Yeah, very much so. That's all right though. I mean, look, I guess there's a couple of different ways to look at it. I mean, we see we see quite a few large organizations, and again, we've seen it in oil and gas. We're talking, top 3 global oil companies, top 5 global oil and gas companies. We've seen it with large chemical companies, where they're using drone data and satellite imagery for monitoring their research and development on crop health and pesticides, and we see these kinds of customers needing a processing pipeline, needing access to data, needing the ability to access a wide range of data, a wide range of analytics, and to have a platform where their own research scientists can experiment with new algorithms and run it on the data that they've already acquired. So these kinds of customers would be perfect for us, and we've been talking to a couple of them. I think so far, with the company that's pretty much 2.5 years old so far, there's sometimes a little bit of a track record that's missing, and every now and again a couple of features that are missing that have so far held us back from some of these larger ones. But we're close. We're very, very close, and I think for us that would be the first one of those would be a huge validation on the work that we've been doing at UP42 to I think the best way to put it is, we want to be the operational backbone of a company's geospatial analytics pipelines. Like that's the place where we want to be. And so far, we've done well with companies that are just building their solution for the first time and starting out. And where we need to move is to start taking over existing pipelines. And here it's not about changing the way that the pipeline works necessarily, but it's really about us taking the algorithms on board UP42, automating a lot of different steps that have typically been done with manual intervention from people and from GIS operators, from data scientists, whatever the case may be, and automating that as much as possible so that the full attention of the human capital within those companies can focus on really the last mile of solving the customer's problem, whether it's algorithmically and developing very specific algorithms, or whether it's actually interpreting the results of the data. It's basically about how do we help those companies to focus the resources they have on the really hard problems and free up the things that can be automated.
You talked a bit about how young UP42 is, and you talked a bit about sort of how you're still a startup and you're growing. Yet, Airbus is the sole owner of UP42. You're a corporate startup, a corporate play, and Digital Ventures has helped incubate and build this. So it's a bit of an unusual startup story. What's your reflection on what was helpful, what hasn't, and don't hold back. Hopefully you don't hold back on Airbus more so than on Digital Ventures, but no pressure.
Look, it's absolutely. It's a very different startup journey to most founders and startups that ever come across. And as you mentioned, right, there are advantages, there are disadvantages. I would say though, on the whole, the advantages so far have outweighed the disadvantages. One thing that I really loved, and this is now going right back to the beginning of the process when I started to get involved, when I was starting to be onboarded towards the end of 2018, still very much in the incubation phase before we started the company. One thing I really loved was how passionate the people were on both the DV side, on the Digital Ventures side, as well as on the Airbus side. I mean, you could really just feel how much energy was being poured into this project, and how many or how much people believed in the vision of what we were trying to achieve. And so that gave me a lot of motivation, a lot of energy, even just in the onboarding phase. And I remember one of my very, very first, I think it was actually my first week, and probably even like my second day on the job or something. It was a Friday celebration and Friday demo, and I just was in a completely different frame of mind and a completely different feeling than any job that I'd had before. The energy was incredible. I was very impressed with the way things were organized right from the beginning. Even in a very early phase, structurally, things were being put in place for long-term success. And a lot of the experimenting, or a lot of the learn by mistake, basically, of setting up a company and figuring out how to structure it, and what tools you need, and what sort of legal hoops you need to step through, a lot of this stuff was, from an administrative perspective, completely taken care of. The depth to which the market was researched and the way that the ideation process went and how we got to the ideas that we got to, that wouldn't have happened in the way that it happened without both the input from and the structure from DV, as well as the sort of professional insights and market insights from the Airbus side. So I think, from a structural perspective, from a sort of kickstart perspective, I kind of imagined a faster way to get moving. And so that part was really, really great. I think the part where that's also been really good is that, I mean, of course, there's pros and cons of being a corporate venture. One of the cons is that, we are still part of Airbus, from the perspective that there's a lot of additional processes and compliance steps, etc., that we would need to move through that other startups maybe don't have to deal with. How I actually see it, though, sometimes as an advantage, even maybe sometimes one in disguise, but it actually can be an advantage. So there's been several things on the legal and finance side where the steps that we're going through as an Airbus subsidiary have basically been instrumental in making sure that everything is correct, that we don't have any legal or financial or accounting or compliance issues or governance issues. And that is not only, from a legal perspective, and in my role as the managing director, it's a huge peace of mind, but also, it prevents problems in the business. And that, I think, is an important thing. The other area where I think it's been advantageous, like hugely advantageous, is that we still, so I need to back up a step here. So our relationship with Airbus is as hands-off and as arm's length as it can possibly be. We have quite a lot of freedom in what we're building from a product perspective, a lot of freedom in how we go to market. Mostly where we're sort of tied into the way that Airbus works is around the compliance processes and the financial governance and those kinds of things. And even when it comes to the business relationship between Airbus, obviously as UP42, the first data supplier that we have on our platform is Airbus, and a lot of the data we're selling is coming from Airbus's satellites like Pleiades and Spot, and very soon, which we're very excited about, Pleiades Neo, Airbus's new constellation. So that's all, part of our platform, part of what we're reselling. But on the business side, there's no major advantage there. We have the same reseller agreements that all the other resellers of Airbus data have. It's a reseller agreement. We need to be purchasing upfront our One Atlas packages, and it's the same reseller agreement as everyone else. So there's no sort of commercial advantage there. But where we do have an advantage is that we have very good connections to the product teams, and as a result, we can also help to steer things that we see would perhaps be better for platforms like UP42 to be able to get access to the data more scalably, and that's advantageous. And then from a market perspective, I think the number of doors that have been opened as a result of us being part of a collaboration between Airbus and BCG Digital Ventures has been significant, and I think we wouldn't be able to overlook that. And finally, I think a big part of it also is quite simply, for the first 3 years of our existence, the management team, myself as the managing director, my co-founders, Magali and Barry, CTO and CFO, we haven't needed to worry about going and finding funding. I think this is something that takes a huge amount of time from founders, and that's something where we have been well looked after from the Airbus side, and has given us a very good runway to make sure that we can set up the business, prove the business, build the product, and start generating real revenue. So, again, there's always some parts of it which are where sometimes we look at other startups and we say like, wow, look how free those guys are. But there are other aspects where I think, at least from the fact that we're quite protected and we have a strong name behind us, it's been more than advantageous.
If you draw a line under this, and think for a moment about all the aspiring startup founders and entrepreneurs or tech experts thinking about getting something to market, would you do this again? And who is this model for, and who is it not for?
I think the model is good for a large business that knows they have a good idea They know that there's a big part of the market that they're missing out on. And they know that if they were able to move fast, they would be able to do well at this business. But they know that there's a few things about the way that they work, the structure of their company, their internal processes, or whatever it might be. Something is holding them back as an organization from being able to ramp up a business in that way. And as a result, by going through a corporate venture process, you're able to carve something out, put a dedicated team on it, invest in it, allow it to go very fast, and basically execute on I wouldn't say like a complete product vision, because there's always some discovery involved, but a sort of general direction of where you think there's a gap in the market. I don't think it's a good idea for people who have some kind of initial thought, but they're not sure and they need a long time to experiment and figure out what the direction is. And the reason is quite simple, is that when you're going through a corporate venture process, as I mentioned, there's a lot of things about the market exploration and the research and the structures and everything was getting ramped up really fast. That also comes though with some cost. And I mean, we had a full team ramped up within 6 months across all departments, whether it was marketing or sales or engineering or product or finance, whatever the case may be. All that stuff was there. So it's kind of as close to an off-the-shelf company ready to go as you're ever going to get. And if you have any doubts about your markets, or if you have any doubts about the revenue potential, or if you have doubts about your product idea, I'm not so sure that that's what you'd want to do. I think probably you might want to go a bit slower and take a bit of a different path.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a large uncanny valley somewhere between, I would say baseline tech research and actually commercializing tech and pushing something out fast to market and scaling. And a lot of that doesn't gel well with corporate. The need for certainty, the need for planning, and frankly also the need for results within sort of relatively short time frames, right? Be it sort of quarterly or yearly press conferences and capital market statements, or be it the average tenure of a CEO or a core leader at one of the larger corporates. That drives the need to scale fast and be relatively certain about where to go. We see that quite a lot. I think the hard part is always keeping the flexibility to experiment within sort of a corridor and not being too narrowly focused on just one thing and then ultimately running into a wall versus free float ideation.
Well, there I think we've actually been quite fortunate. I mean, it's not only it hasn't been something where we've gotten a complete product idea and we've executed every single part of that initial idea. I mean, there's been some areas where we've doubled down on parts of the initial vision. There's been some areas where we've taken things off the table completely. There's been some areas where we've kind of done it but gone a slightly different path. And what I've really, it's not always an easy discussion, but it's always a very good discussion to have with our board, which is basically, okay, like how does the learnings that we've had along the way impact what we want to do next? And I think that in the first year, we did have some situations where I think the feeling was, look, guys, you're not far enough down your learning path yet to start deviating from the original plan. But as we've gained more experience, as we've proven that we can execute on the product vision, as we've proven that we can close customers and generate revenue, there's been a lot more flexibility and a lot more understanding that now it's time to start maybe pivoting in some areas or tweaking the direction of the company in some areas to make sure that we're following those things that are working rather than following those things that are not. And I think it's been a good balance. It's been a good balance of keeping us true to the original goals, but also allowing us to absorb the learnings and basically start executing on what we think would be the next steps as a result of those learnings. So I think so far the balance has been quite good.
Awesome. One thing, very different topic. Sorry for jumping. One thing I really love is the fact that you're doing a ton of sort of really hardcore tech work in a really technical, you call it niche within the niche tech field, out of Europe, out of Berlin, where we don't see a ton of tech innovation in the startup field in Europe. We see quite a lot happening, quite a lot of funding going, to the US, to China, we actually often naturally look to other markets for that. I find that truly fascinating, and maybe you can reflect a bit about whether Europe has actually been helpful, and a lot of the European Union programs are helpful, or not. But one thing I wanted to double click on more specifically, you talked a bit about Pleiad Neo, which is a really new cool thing coming out, and maybe you can share a bit on what we can expect and when ideally we can expect whatever comes out of Pleiad Neo for users.
Sure. So I mean, Pleiades Neo is a new constellation coming from Airbus. It will be a constellation of 4 very high resolution satellites, and essentially there's a couple of things which make it pretty special, and one of them is just the high resolution. So it will have 30 centimeter native resolution imagery, which is pretty much industry leading. When it's launched, we have 2 satellites, or rather Airbus has 2 satellites launched already, with another 2 coming in the next couple of months. So the resolution is one thing, and what it will allow, obviously, as well as a much higher frequency of collection. So basically collecting over the same area multiple times, and basically this allows use cases around monitoring, and basically a huge amount of flexibility in terms of capturing data when it's needed. The other thing which I find really fascinating with Pleiades Neo is the turnaround time that it will have in terms of being able to task the satellite versus when you'll be able to get the data back. And Airbus is basically saying that this can be as fast as 45 minutes end-to-end round trip in terms of being able to tell the satellite that you need an image and being able to get that image down to the ground. And it's able to do this because it's making use of the Space Data Highway, which is a public-private partnership between a couple of players, including Airbus and the European Space Agency. So essentially, instead of waiting to find a ground station to communicate with, the satellites are all bouncing via laser communication, bouncing up to satellites that are orbiting much higher than they are. And because of the sort of angles, those satellites always have communication with the ground. And so this constellation will have near permanent communication with the ground, which enables a much higher data throughput on top of all of the sort of main characteristics of the sensor and the satellite itself. So we're really are looking forward to getting our hands on that data. I mean, Airbus has already been posting quite a lot about the sample data that they've been collecting so far. And we're pretty excited to be able to be one of the first platforms that will be able to resell and provide access to Pleiades Neo data. And I think it's really going to be an important step forward in the industry. But also, it's an important constellation, but it's an evolution that's happening, right? We see a lot of new constellations coming up from other providers like Satellogic and Black Sky and Capella Space and ICEYE, etc. And Planets as well is continuing to expand their constellation. And then we see the 2 main players, Maxar and Airbus, pushing forward on the super high resolution satellite imagery, Airbus with Pleiades Neo and Maxar with Legion constellation as well. And of course, UP42 is a neutral platform. Of course, we're an Airbus subsidiary. Of course, we will resell Airbus's data, but we also have the goal of being able to provide access to data and algorithms from everyone in the market, including Airbus's competitors.
Awesome. So is the European Union doing enough to support you and help you grow and push, or is there something you'd wish you'd get more of?
It's a little bit of a double-sided answer there. I think on the one side, UP42 is as a corporate venture, as a company, that didn't yet have too much revenue in 2019 in November. Oh, sorry, in 2019, because that's when it counted. As a company that is now more than 15 people, we're now 64, as I mentioned. There's a lot of the programs that we've been looking at and trying to benefit from where we seem to be falling between the cracks. So we're too big for this one. We can't do that one because we're part of a large corporate. We can't do that one because we didn't have revenues yet in 2019. So there's quite a few where I think we're falling between the cracks, and it's a bit frustrating. But there are a lot of other programs that we're looking at, which are very interesting, specifically coming from the European Space Agency. with their InQ program and the Cassini program, which I think is extremely beneficial for the industry. The European Commission has recently pushed out the new version of their New Horizons project, where they've put aside a lot of investment for basically new space and to try and stimulate new space economy in Europe, which includes also, amongst other things, they have a lot of sort of matchmaking and startup programs, etc. But it also includes €1 billion of funding for startups in the space. So, this is on top of all of the programs that they've already done in the past as well. So I think they are doing a lot of the European Commission, European Union, European Space Agency. They really are doing a lot to stimulate the new space sector and the downstream sector in particular. The one thing that I would add to that, though, is that what we would like to see is more investment towards helping startups to do real business versus less investment in sort of once-off projects that are establishing yet another platform for something that's already exists in a couple of places. And I think we would get further as an industry if the investment was really focused on helping companies to become commercially viable long term, rather than just setting up another platform, for some reason. So that's the one thing where I'd say I hope we see a shift of the policy. But I think we already start to see this with the Cassini program as well.
So more viable business, less program and platform and one-off plays.
Exactly. Exactly.
And hey, I mean, $1 billion sounds like a ton of money, but if you think about the size of the European Union and the size of the startup community, I think you very quickly realize it's a small add to the overall pie and the need out there. But cool. Hey, let's talk about the other elephant in the room. The big topic in Berlin and probably everywhere in Europe is how are you dealing with the results of the pandemic, the COVID crisis? How has that impacted the work models? Are you all fully remote? You're tapping into much wider pools of people. What's happened on your side? How have you dealt with that? And what's your secret sauce in making it work?
I'm not sure if there's a secret sauce. We've just been doing what we can, and I think in some parts of it have been quite successful, and in other parts of it maybe there's some learnings to be had. Look, I think one thing that's maybe a bit different about UP42 is we basically only got really started when the pandemic hit. So the year that we had before the pandemic was building the team, building the first version of the commercial product. And 2020 was our year to really sort of get going straight out the gate and start growing the business really fast, etc. And pandemic hits. We went from everyone in the office every single day to everyone working from home overnight, as I'm sure many companies did. We were a bit proactive about it, though. We didn't wait for official information about work from home or something. I know in Germany there's a lot of talk about some employers not really allowing people to work from home, and it needed to eventually come from the government, basically as a regulation that said you have to allow your workers to work from home. We were pretty proactive about it, and it was not so difficult for us because we had set up the company from the beginning to be fully online. Everything we did right from the start was cloud-based. There was nothing in the office really that we were tied to, so it was pretty easy to do. I think the one change that we made was the change that we needed to make anyway in terms of the growth of the company, and that was basically shifting from the initial model we had was basically product team, engineering team, and somehow they work together, to shifting more towards product teams, which had all the different functions they needed in them to be able to deliver parts of the product and parts of the what the customers were interacting with. So we shifted into that, and again, this happened really almost overnight. So there was a lot of learning that we had to do as a team, not only how to work in product teams, but also how to work remotely. Generally, though, I think it went really, really well. I didn't, in the first part of the pandemic, I don't think we had any major implications from lockdown, from the pandemic. Of course, it's hard to say, how much more revenue would we have made in 2020 had there been no lockdown, or maybe we would have had less. I don't know. It's impossible to say. But certainly, at least in 2020, I don't think we saw too much impact from a team perspective and from a company perspective. I think there was a sort of novelty around it in a way that helped people to make it through this first part. The challenge for us really has been in 2021. And I think what's happening is that there's just a lot of fatigue. There's really just a lot of stress about the sort of long situation that everyone has gone through, and it manifests very differently for different people. Some people are close to burnout, even though maybe the workload hasn't really changed. Some people have completely rethought what they want to do, and maybe they're now deciding that they need to relocate their families to other countries or move to different parts of the world, and definitely not working remotely because I don't want that for myself. Other people are perfectly happy at home and don't really want to come back to the office again, which is also, I think, as I think most people are now accepting, part of the forward-looking model. But I think what this has really meant for us is that it's been very, very hard to keep the team dynamic and the company culture going that we've originally had. So we've now started opening up the office again, fully optional. Everyone's either testing on a regular basis or vaccinated, as per the rules. But we're trying to create the sense now again of a community, of a team, giving the opportunity for people to engage with each other and build up the relationships again. The main problem for us as a result of all of this, and I know that it's a problem that a lot of startups are having in Berlin and globally as well, is that basically at the moment we have a much higher turnover than we would have liked and that we have anticipated. And this is something that's really we're battling with. I mean, we're 64 people now. We've hired more than 30 people this year only, and we're trying to grow the company still significantly this year and next year. And it kind of feels, 2 steps forward, 1 step back in terms of growing the team. So there's lots of things we're trying. Some smaller things in Mindspace subscriptions, Headspace subscriptions, or we're offering coaching to all of our employees if they choose to take it. And some of those things are helping, some of them are not. And now we just need to find out how we deal with this. I don't know if it's going to be something that naturally ends. We definitely are pushing forward now in terms of what is our culture around hybrid working and how we're going to do this in a way that we have the best of both worlds, home office and some purpose-based presence, so that people can build up those relationships and engage with each other. But certainly the hardest problem that I've ever had to deal with in my professional life. It's really, really a tough one.
That's a really unprecedented situation. I can just very much relate, Sean. I think looking back at Digital Ventures, our inflection point was somewhere early 2021, when it became clear that this is not the end, but some midway point or an uncertain sort of intermediate stop on a long pandemic journey. And that's been tough on a lot of people.
One thing. Just one thing to add on that as well, though, is that it's hard enough to build a startup from scratch anyway, right? And we're a lot of the time we're just learning as we go along. Obviously we're all bringing in our different experiences, and I have a very strong and solid management team, and I'm very grateful for that. But a lot of the time we're learning as we go. So it's not like we have the answers for everything. And I think the difficult thing is that our people often expect us to always have the answer for everything and to never make mistakes. And I mean, we do, and when we have, it's sometimes really difficult to be the ones who are always having the answers when you're actually in the same situation that everyone else is as well.
CEO is a solitary job. But I mean, let's also be honest, no one's been here, right? This is it's arguably the biggest public health crisis since the Spanish flu, probably, if not more so. It's truly an unprecedented setup. I've just reflected with a couple of colleagues. You go back a year and a half, and how we originally thought about what was going to happen in 2020 and how the world would change. No one, I think, would have imagined that end of 2021. There'd still be restrictions on public life. We'd be wearing masks. there would be a vaccine out. I think no one actually expected things to go that fast. But that we'd still be battling with new mutations and variants and a very, very different future. So what's your long-term view on working models at UP42? Are you going back fully in the office? Are you going fully remote? Are you staying hybrid?
Look, we were never really fully in the office. I mean, we had a lot of people who were coming to the office every day. That was kind of how we started. But right from the beginning, people could work from home when they wanted to, and we had some like nominal number in our HR systems, which was just there for practical purposes, so we could keep track of or not keep track, but basically I think from an insurance perspective, it's good to know if someone's working from home or if they're in the office. But if people needed to work from home more than what was allocated in the tool, then we just increased it. It was never ever a question of expecting everyone to be in the office all the time. So long term, we're not expecting to get to the point where everyone's back in the office. We're very much are expecting, though, that we have more people coming to the office because they want to be here and they want to engage with their colleagues. And again, we're working on a hybrid concept to encourage that. But we do expect that remote working, whether it's part-time or full-time, in some cases probably full-time, is going to be a permanent part of how we run things at UP42. Again,
I'd love to continue to compare notes on that, and I hope some of the people here in the comments and reactions on LinkedIn will actually have additional views and talking points. This feels like such a big social experiment that we're all in together. Be really, I'm really looking forward to sharing and comparing notes across the widest variety possible in Berlin and beyond.
I mean, I just hope that we can get to the point where we're able to balance the benefits of both, right? I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, for the last 10 years, I've been working from home when I really need to get something done. So for me, it's not so much a question about, are people productive when they're at home? Of course they can be. But I think there's quite a lot of personal interaction and relationships and fun with other people that you miss out on when you don't have that connection in the office, or even outside the office, close to the office at the Friday afternoon bar or whatever the case may be. I just hope we can get back to that point where we have at least a healthy balance between the two. Not because, again, it's not about productivity. It's not about productivity at all. It's about a sense of belonging and a sense of community, and that's the part where I notice that we have more people.
We need social interaction, and it's part of building a company culture, especially if you're young, startup with a high growth rate.
I mean, and I noticed with the people that are coming back to the office regularly. I mean, they're meeting often for lunch or after work, whatever the case may be, and the relationships are strong and fun.
Sean, this has been awesome. Thanks a ton. Lots of good insights. And I'll give you a chance for anything you want to say as a closing word. I do hope we've found some people who are desperately interested in UP42 and really need a great backbone for data and geospatial data, geospatial algorithms processing on that. Or are looking for a new job in one of the most interesting tech players in Berlin, obviously.
We have a ton open.
Also at Digital Ventures, if you care for, and if you want to have the next UP42 in your industry, also give me a call. That's a shameless marketing plug that I have to do. But I mean, back to you, maybe Sean. Any closing words to the audience? Anything you want to keep us with?
Well, first of all, Juergen, thanks very much for having me. It's been a great conversation, and always great to chat. One thing that I want to leave the audience with here, mainly pertaining to why we are here as UP42 and what we're trying to achieve. If I look back over the last 20 years in geospatial, there are so many examples of how what was some kind of niche technology in geospatial has exploded and become absolutely critical to everyday life. GPS is an example of it. Right? Where would we be without GPSs in the billions of devices all over the world that there are today? Drone technology is another one in terms of being a sensor platform for collecting data around agriculture or power line monitoring or whatever the case may be, and even just maps. Where would we be without Google Maps, Apple Maps, Here Maps, etc.? And all of these revolutions have started with technology that was really niche and difficult to understand and difficult to work with. And they've ended up now being massively irreplaceable and having a huge economic impact on our planet. And I believe that Earth observation, it's an old industry, it's going back decades, and it has been having an impact already, but I believe the potential for impact is massive. And that's why we are here. We want to make it easier for the world to get access to this information and to do good with this information. So, looking forward to that journey for sure.
Awesome. And I think we're both old enough to remember a world before GPS and Apple or Google Maps or even navigation systems. So no turning back there. Hey,
absolutely.
Thanks a lot. Thanks to the audience. Thanks for tuning in and listening in. I do hope you enjoyed that. Leave comments, chat, talk to us. I know Sean's very engaged, and I try to be as well. I'm super happy to start a conversation here, about anything you want to talk about. So thanks a lot, and have a great day, everyone.